It was late September in Milwaukee, a Tuesday that felt like the end of summer, trying not to admit it. I was home from a brief hospital stay, moving slower than I liked, measuring the day in cups of tea. Our condo sat above the river, quiet after 9, except for the soft hum of the service elevator. That night, the building's janitor did his rounds a little later than usual. He told me later he was trying to catch up after a broken vacuum. I didn't think much of it then. Families have their rhythms. Mine came around with soup and small talk, and left with promises to handle things. What I remember most is the stillness of the hallway camera and the blue linen box on my dresser. Sometimes you only see what's missing when the room goes quiet. And when I finally really looked, at what had changed in my own home, I understood that trust isn't something you lose all at once. It leaves in increments. A key turned the wrong way. A drawer that doesn't close is quite flush. A sister who taps her nails on the table when she never used to. That September, while I was recovering from surgery, my family divided my jewelry in the middle of the night. And the only reason I found out was because the janitor ran late fixing a vacuum. Let me tell you how a broken appliance and a late-night timestamp became the quiet tools of justice. Let me tell you how I learned that revenge doesn't need to be loud to be complete. Ellen Margaret Carver had lived in the riverfront condominium on North Water Street for 14 years. She was 56 years old, never married, and had worked as an administrative manager for a regional utilities cooperative until her semi-retirement 3 years earlier. The position had been demanding but stable, the kind of career that built slowly over decades, accumulating pension credits and professional respect without ever making headlines. Ellen had always been the person who kept systems running, who noticed when invoices didn't match purchase orders, who maintained filing systems that could withstand audits and staff transitions. She was thorough, patient, and fundamentally uninterested in drama. Those qualities had served her well in her professional life, and they defined her personal life as well. The condo was modest but well-maintained, 900 square feet on the 8th floor, with windows that looked east toward the Milwaukee River and the low industrial rooflines beyond. In the mornings, light came through at an angle that made the hardwood floors glow amber, and in the evenings, the river reflected the city lights in long, wavering lines. The building itself was older, constructed in the 1970s during a brief period of urban renewal, with thick concrete walls and narrow hallways that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and the varnish they used on the lobby handrails. It was quiet most nights, the kind of place where people kept to themselves but nodded in the elevator, where you knew your neighbors by floor and unit number but rarely by name. Ellen liked that. She valued privacy, both her own and others. She had been admitted to Aurora Sinai Medical Center on a Thursday afternoon in mid-September for a routine gallbladder removal. The procedure was laparoscopic, minimally invasive, requiring only 3 small incisions and an overnight stay for observation. Her sister, Marjorie, had picked her up from the hospital on Saturday morning. Marjorie, who went by Mara, was 54, 2 years younger than Ellen, and worked part-time as a real estate agent in the suburbs. She had been married for 27 years to Greg Ellison, a contractor who specialized in residential remodeling and small commercial jobs. They lived in Wauwatosa, about 20 minutes west of Ellen's condo, in a 2-story colonial with a detached garage and a yard that Mara kept meticulously trimmed. Their daughter, Nicole, was 28 and worked in marketing for a beverage distribution company. On the drive home from the hospital, Mara had been cheerful, talking about the weather and Nicole's new responsibilities at work and a recipe she had seen on a cooking show. Ellen sat in the passenger seat with a pillow pressed against her abdomen, nodding occasionally, watching the buildings slide past. The painkillers made everything feel slightly distant, as if she were watching the day through a window rather than participating in it. When they arrived at the condo, Mara had helped her upstairs with her overnight bag and a plastic sack of discharge papers. She stayed for about an hour, made tea, asked if Ellen needed anything from the pharmacy, and said she would check in the next day. Ellen thanked her and locked the door after she left, then stood in the quiet apartment, listening to the buildings settle around her. That first night home, Ellen slept in the front room. The bed in her bedroom felt too high, and bending at the waist caused a sharp pulling sensation near the incision sites. She arranged the sofa cushions into a makeshift recliner, covered herself with a quilt, and kept the television on low volume, some old detective show she had seen before. The room was dim except for the screen's flicker and the glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. She woke every few hours, drank water from a bottle she kept on the side table, and checked the time on her phone. The hours passed slowly, marked by the changing light and the occasional sound of a car passing on the street below. By Sunday morning, she was feeling slightly better, able to move around the apartment without wincing, though she still tired easily. Mara came by again on Sunday with a container of homemade lentil soup and a loaf of bread from the bakery near her house. She set them on the kitchen counter and asked Ellen how she was managing. Ellen said she was fine, just slow. Mara nodded and glanced around the apartment, her gaze lingering on the hallway that led to the bedroom. She asked if Ellen needed help organizing anything, sorting through papers, tidying up. The question felt slightly odd, but Ellen dismissed it as typical sisterly concern. She said no, everything was fine. Mara smiled and said to call if she changed her mind. Before she left, she mentioned that Greg had a spare key to the condo from years ago, when Ellen had gone out of town and asked them to water the plants. Ellen remembered that. She had given them a key 7 years earlier, during a 2-week trip to visit a college friend in Oregon, and she had never asked for it back. It had seemed reasonable at the time. They were family. Trust was assumed. Over the next few days, Ellen moved between the sofa and the kitchen table, drinking tea, reading library books she had checked out before the surgery, and responding to a few work emails from former colleagues who still copied her on project updates. She found herself sleeping more than usual, napping in the afternoons with the windows cracked open to let in the September air. The weather was pleasant, that brief window between summer heat and autumn chill when the temperature stayed in the low 70s and the air smelled clean. The building was quiet during the day. Most of the residents were older, retired or semi-retired, and the few families with children lived on the lower floors. She rarely heard footsteps in the hallway, and the elevator's soft mechanical hum became a kind of background rhythm to her recovery. On Tuesday evening, 5 days after her discharge, Ellen was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea when she heard the elevator doors open down the hall. It was after 9, later than the mail usually came, and she wasn't expecting anyone. She listened as the elevator hummed and settled, then heard the faint sound of wheels rolling across the lobby floor. A moment later, there was a soft knock on her door. She stood slowly, walked to the peephole, and saw Luis Ramirez, the building's night shift janitor, standing in the hallway with his cleaning cart. Luis was 49 years old, a steady, quiet man who had worked at the building for almost 8 years. He kept his hair short and wore dark blue work pants and a matching shirt with his name stitched above the pocket. He had a kind face, serious but not unfriendly, and he always nodded when they passed each other in the lobby or by the mailboxes. Ellen had spoken to him dozens of times over the years, brief exchanges about the weather or the building's maintenance schedule, and she had always found him reliable and courteous. She opened the door. "Good evening, Miss Carver," Luis said. "Evening, Luis. I am running late tonight. I had to fix the vacuum. It broke this afternoon." "No problem." He nodded, glanced down the hallway, then back at her. "I wanted to let you know I will be working past my usual time. In case you hear anything." "That's fine. Thank you for letting me know." He nodded again and started to turn his cart, then paused. "Are you feeling better? I heard you were in the hospital." "Yes, thank you. Just a small surgery. I'm recovering." "Good. Take care." "You too." Luis pushed his cart toward the stairwell, and Ellen closed the door. She returned to the kitchen table and finished her tea. The evening was uneventful. She watched the news, took her medication, and went to bed around 10:30, still sleeping on the sofa because it felt easier than navigating the height of her bedroom mattress. The building was silent except for the occasional creak of the pipes and the low hum of the service elevator moving between floors. She fell asleep to the sound of rain beginning to tap against the windows, a soft, steady rhythm that deepened as the night went on. What Ellen didn't know was that Luis had logged his vacuum repair in the building's maintenance binder. The vacuum motor had burned out around 3 in the afternoon, and he had spent nearly an hour trying to fix it before realizing he needed a replacement part. He had driven to a supply store on the south side, purchased a new motor, and returned to the building just before 7. By the time he finished installing it and started his nightly rounds, it was after 9, which was significantly later than his usual schedule. The building manager, a 52-year-old man named Donald Kerr, kept detailed logs of all maintenance activity, and Luis made sure to note the delay. He wrote the time, the reason, and the resolution in neat handwriting on the ruled form clipped to the inside of the binder. He noted that his rounds began at 9:17 instead of the usual 7:45, and he initiated the entry with the date, Tuesday, September 26, 2025. The building's security system was basic but functional. There were 4 cameras, one in the lobby near the reception desk, one positioned above the mailboxes, one covering the side entrance near the parking garage, and one mounted above the service elevator on each floor. The cameras recorded motion-triggered clips and stored them on a digital server maintained by a third-party security vendor. The system was configured to retain footage for 30 days before automatically overwriting the oldest files. This retention period was standard for residential buildings of this size and age, determined by the property management company's insurance requirements and data storage capacity. Residents rarely thought about the cameras unless something went wrong: a package stolen from the lobby, a fender bender in the parking lot, a dispute about parking spaces. The footage was grainy but clear enough to identify people by their height, build, and general appearance, and the timestamps were accurate to within 2 seconds. That Tuesday night, while Ellen slept on her sofa and Luis finished his delayed rounds, the passenger elevator recorded a motion clip at 12:43 in the morning. 3 people entered the elevator in the lobby, 2 women and a man. They were carrying canvas tote bags, the kind sold at grocery stores for reusable shopping, dark green with reinforced handles. The elevator ascended. The system logged the destination as the 8th floor. At 1:21 in the morning, 38 minutes later, the same 3 people descended in the elevator. The tote bags looked heavier now, fuller, sagging slightly at the handles in a way they hadn't during the ascent. Luis saw the clips the next morning when he logged into the security system to check the time-stamped footage from his late shift. He always reviewed the previous night's activity as part of his routine, looking for anything unusual: doors left propped open, unfamiliar vehicles in the lot, people lingering in the stairwells or common areas. It was part of his job to notice patterns and irregularities, to be the eyes of the building during the hours when most residents were asleep. When he saw the 12:43 clip, he recognized the silhouettes immediately. He had seen them before, visiting Miss Carver's unit on weekends, carrying groceries, or sitting in the lobby while she came down to meet them. He didn't know their names, but he knew they were family. Sisters, he thought, or perhaps a sister and her husband. They had always been polite when they passed him in the hallway, nodding and smiling, treating him with the casual courtesy that people reserve for service workers they see regularly but don't really know. He watched the clip again, noting the time, the number of people, the bags. Then he checked the access log for the side entrance. The building used key fobs for after-hours entry, small plastic cards that residents tapped against a sensor to unlock the doors. The sensor logged each attempted access, successful or not, along with a timestamp and the fob's unique identification number. The log showed an attempted entry at 12:39, 4 minutes before the elevator clip, with a notation: failed read, fob not recognized. Then, at 12:43, the log showed a manual unlock, which meant someone with a master key, usually Luis or the building manager, had opened the door from the inside. Luis remembered that moment clearly. He had been in the lobby, emptying the trash bins near the mailboxes, when he heard someone knocking lightly on the glass of the side entrance. He had walked over and seen 2 women and a man standing outside in the rain. One of the women leaned close to the sensor, holding a key fob, and gestured in a way that conveyed frustration and apology. The door hadn't opened. Luis had assumed it was a malfunction, something that happened occasionally when the batteries in the fobs died or when moisture affected the magnetic strips. He had unlocked the door from the inside, held it open, and nodded as they thanked him and walked past toward the elevator. They had seemed calm, purposeful, not rushed. One of the women carried an umbrella, which she was in the process of closing. The man wore a light jacket and carried 2 of the tote bags. Luis had returned to his cart and thought nothing more of it. But seeing the clip now, with the timestamp and the bags, he felt uneasy. The unease was subtle, not alarm but a low-grade sense that something didn't quite fit. Why would family members visit at nearly 1 in the morning? Why carry empty bags up and full bags down? And why had their key fob failed? He didn't jump to conclusions. Years of working in buildings had taught him that there were usually reasonable explanations for odd behavior. Maybe they had come to check on Miss Carver after her surgery and brought supplies. Maybe they were picking up items she wanted to donate. Maybe the fob failure was simply a dead battery. But the unease persisted, so he saved the clip to a separate folder on his desktop and made a note in his personal log, a small spiral notebook he kept in his locker. He wrote the date, the time, the failed fob, the manual unlock, and the elevator activity. Then he closed the notebook and continued with his shift. Ellen spent the rest of that week recovering. She moved back to her bedroom on Thursday, finding that she could finally sleep flat without discomfort. The incisions were healing well, small pink lines that itched more than they hurt. She sorted through mail, paid bills online, and started light housekeeping, wiping down counters and folding laundry. On Friday afternoon, while she was organizing the kitchen cupboards, her phone buzzed with a text message from her niece, Nicole. "Hi, Aunt Ellen. Hope you're feeling better. Can I borrow the pearl studs for Mom's dinner next week?" Ellen read the message twice. The pearl studs were a gift from her mother, small freshwater pearls set in gold posts, simple and elegant. They lived in the blue linen jewelry box on her dresser, along with a few other pieces, a silver cuff bracelet with a small dent near the hinge from when it had been dropped on a tile floor decades ago, a string of amber beads that had belonged to her grandmother, and a pair of antique garnet earrings that had been in the family for 3 generations. Ellen rarely wore any of it. The pieces were sentimental, not extravagant, but they mattered to her in the way that objects connected to memory always matter. She texted back, "Not right now. I'm still resting. Another time." Her niece replied almost immediately, "No problem. Feel better." Ellen set her phone down and returned to the kitchen. She made herself a sandwich, ate half of it, and drank a glass of water. Later that afternoon, she walked down the hallway to her bedroom and stood in front of the dresser. The blue linen box sat where it always did, tucked under a folded sweater in the top drawer. She had kept it there for years, a habit formed less from any concern about theft than from a simple preference for keeping valuable items out of sight. She pulled the box out, opened the lid, and looked inside. The pearl studs were there, resting in their small velvet compartment. The silver cuff was there, nestled beside a thin gold chain. The garnet earrings were there, wrapped carefully in a square of felt. But the amber beads were not. Ellen closed the box and set it on top of the dresser. She opened the drawer fully and moved the sweater aside, checking the corners and the back panel. Nothing. She opened the other drawers, one by one, methodically lifting out folded clothes and checking underneath. She checked the small jewelry tray on top of the dresser, a ceramic dish where she sometimes left her watch or a ring. She checked the nightstand, the closet shelf, the bathroom counter. The amber beads were gone. She sat on the edge of the bed and thought. The necklace was old, late 1800s according to family records, strung on a thin brass wire with a simple clasp. The beads were irregular, hand-polished, ranging in color from pale honey to deep russet. The third bead from the clasp had a chip, a smooth crescent where the resin had flaked away years ago. Ellen's grandmother had told her it happened when the necklace fell during a move in the 1950s. Ellen's mother had kept it anyway, valuing the imperfection as part of the necklace's history, and when she passed, she left it to Ellen with the understanding that it would be preserved for future generations. It wasn't worth a fortune, maybe $400 or $500 according to an appraisal Ellen had done years ago, but it was irreplaceable. Ellen stood and walked to the small filing cabinet in the corner of the bedroom. She kept her important papers there: insurance documents, tax returns, medical records, and a manila folder labeled appraisals. She pulled the folder out and sat on the bed, flipping through the pages. There were photographs of each piece in the jewelry box, printed in color on standard printer paper, along with handwritten notes describing the item, its origin, and any distinguishing features. The amber necklace had its own sheet. The photo showed the beads laid out in a curve against a white background, the chip on the third bead clearly visible. Beneath the photo, Ellen had written, "Amber bead necklace, circa 1890, brass wire, hand-polished irregular beads, chip on bead number 3, crescent shape, left side. Appraised January 2018, value $450. Sentimental value, irreplaceable. Family provenance, maternal grandmother, then mother, now Ellen M. Carver." She stared at the photo for a long time, her mind working through the possibilities. She tried to remember the last time she had opened the box. It had been weeks, maybe longer. She rarely wore the pieces, and she hadn't thought to check on them since returning from the hospital. Who had access to her apartment? Mara and Greg, certainly. They had a key. Had anyone else been inside? She thought back through the week. Mara had visited twice, once on Saturday when she picked Ellen up from the hospital, and once on Sunday when she brought soup. Both visits had been brief, cordial, unremarkable. Greg hadn't come inside, as far as Ellen could remember. Nicole hadn't visited. The building manager had come by on Monday to drop off a notice about upcoming fire alarm testing, but he had only stood in the doorway, handed her the paper, and left. Ellen took out her phone and opened the Notes app. She typed a new entry, dated it, and wrote, "Amber necklace missing from blue box. Last confirmed present, August 27, 2025, when I reorganized the drawer before the surgery. Checked all drawers, surfaces, and storage areas. Not found. No signs of forced entry. Key holders, Mara and Greg Ellison. Last known visits, Saturday, September 23rd, Mara, hospital pickup. Sunday, September 24th, Mara, brought soup." She saved the note and returned the folder to the filing cabinet. Then she walked back to the dresser, picked up the blue linen box, and carried it to the kitchen table. She sat down and opened it again, this time taking out each piece and setting it on the table in a row. The pearl studs, the silver cuff, the garnet earrings. She photographed them with her phone, one by one, making sure the light was clear and the details were visible. Then she returned them to the box and closed the lid, but instead of putting it back in the dresser, she left it on the kitchen counter where she could see it. The rest of the evening was quiet. Ellen made tea, watched a documentary about migratory birds on public television, and went to bed early. But before she turned off the light, she took out her phone and looked at the Notes app again. She reread the entry about the necklace, then added a new line: "Niece requested pearl studs via text. Friday, September 29th. The request declined. Screenshot saved." She took a screenshot of the text conversation with Nicole, saved it to a folder labeled Documentation, and set the phone on the nightstand. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlights outside. Ellen lay still, listening to the building settle around her, the soft creaks and hums that marked the passage of time. She thought about the key fob Mara and Greg had, the one she had given them 7 years ago for plant watering. She thought about the way Mara had glanced down the hallway on Sunday, lingering near the bedroom door with a look Ellen couldn't quite read. She thought about the text from Nicole, the timing of it, the casual assumption that borrowing jewelry was a simple favor between family members. And she thought about the amber beads, the chip on the third bead, the way her grandmother used to hold them up to the light and say they looked like captured sunlight. Tiny pieces of ancient resin that had somehow survived millions of years only to disappear from a locked apartment in Milwaukee. Ellen didn't sleep much that night. But by morning, she had decided what to do. She would watch. She would wait. She would write everything down. And she would see what happened next. The following Sunday, Mara invited Ellen to lunch at her house in Wauwatosa. The invitation came via text on Saturday afternoon. Lunch tomorrow? 1 o'clock? Nothing fancy. Just want to check on you, Ellen agreed, even though she still felt tired easily and the drive seemed longer than it should. Mara picked her up just before 1, chatting about the weather, which had turned cooler, and a new listing she was showing that week, a ranch-style house near the county line that needed updating but had good bones. When they arrived at the house, Greg was in the driveway, washing his truck, a large black Ford F-150 with mud on the wheel wells and a contractor's logo on the door. He waved as they pulled in, then dried his hands on a towel tucked into his belt and walked over to greet them. "Ellen," he said, extending his hand. "Good to see you up and around." "Thanks, Greg. How are you feeling?" "Better. Slow, but better." He nodded, held the passenger door open as she climbed out, and followed them inside. The house smelled like roasted chicken and herbs, rosemary and thyme mingling with the scent of baked bread. Mara had set the dining room table with cloth napkins and her good dishes, the white ones with the thin gold rim that she only used for family gatherings. Ellen sat in her usual chair, the one near the window that looked out onto the backyard, and accepted a glass of water from Nicole, who was visiting for the afternoon. They talked about small things, the news, a movie someone had seen, a neighbor's ongoing dispute about a fence that encroached 6 inches onto the adjacent property. Greg carved the chicken with practiced efficiency and served it with roasted potatoes and green beans. Everything was pleasant, cordial, familiar in the way that family meals are when everyone is performing their expected roles. Halfway through the meal, Ellen noticed Greg's wristwatch. It was new, or at least she hadn't seen it before on any of his previous visits. The band was leather, dark brown and supple, with a silver buckle that caught the light. The face was large and round, with what looked like Roman numerals marking the hours, though from her angle she couldn't be certain. It looked expensive, the kind of watch that came in a presentation box with documentation and a warranty card. Greg caught her looking and smiled, a quick, easy expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You like it?" he asked. "It's nice. Gift from a client. Guy, I did a kitchen remodel last month. He works in finance downtown, said it was a thank you for finishing ahead of schedule." "That's generous." "He was happy with the work. I told him he didn't have to, but you know how it is. Some people like to show appreciation." Ellen nodded and took another bite of chicken. Mara refilled her water glass without being asked and offered more potatoes. Ellen declined, saying she was pacing herself, still adjusting her appetite after the surgery. They finished the meal without incident, cleared the table together, and moved to the living room for coffee. Ellen sat on the sofa near the bookshelf, a tall oak unit filled with paperbacks and framed photographs, and sipped from a small porcelain cup while Mara talked about a house showing she had scheduled for Tuesday, a split level in Brookfield with original hardwood floors. Greg sat in the armchair by the window, scrolling through his phone with his thumb, occasionally nodding at something Mara said, but mostly absorbed in whatever he was reading. At one point, Ellen excused herself to use the bathroom. On her way back through the kitchen, she passed the counter near the refrigerator and saw 2 canvas tote bags sitting there, folded neatly and stacked one on top of the other. They were dark green, the same shade she had seen in grocery stores, with reinforced handles and a small logo printed on the side. She paused, looked at them for a moment longer than was casual, then continued to the living room and sat back down on the sofa. The conversation resumed. Nicole asked about Ellen's recovery timeline, whether she would be back to full activity soon. Ellen said the doctor had cleared her for light exercise in another week and normal activity by mid-October. Mara said that was good, that she had been worried. Ellen thanked her and finished her coffee. When Mara drove her home later that afternoon, Ellen thanked her for lunch and said it was nice to spend time together. Mara said they should do it again soon, maybe in a few weeks when Ellen was feeling completely back to normal. Ellen agreed, waved as Mara pulled out of the parking lot, and rode the elevator up to her floor. Back in her condo, she walked directly to the kitchen table, took out her phone, and opened the Notes app. She added a new entry, dated it, and wrote, "Sunday lunch at Mara's house." Greg wearing new wristwatch, claims client gift. Description: leather band, dark brown, silver buckle, large round face, appears to have Roman numerals. Style suggests expensive brand. Canvas tote bags observed on kitchen counter, dark green, grocery store type, reinforced handles. Quantity: 2 bags, folded and stacked. Same style as bags potentially visible in elevator security footage. She paused, stared at the screen, then added another line. Greg's explanation for watch felt rehearsed. Mara did not acknowledge or discuss the watch. Nicole seemed unaware of anything unusual. She saved the note and set the phone down. Then she walked to the bedroom and opened the top drawer of the dresser. The blue linen box was still on the kitchen counter where she had left it the previous night, but she wanted to check the drawer itself to see if anything else seemed disturbed. She pulled the drawer out fully, moved the sweater aside, and ran her hand along the bottom and sides. Everything seemed in order. She checked the other drawers as well, noting the arrangement of clothes, the position of items in the corners. Nothing appeared to have been moved recently. She closed the drawers and walked to the small filing cabinet. She pulled out the appraisal folder again and flipped to the page with the photograph of the amber necklace. She looked at the chip on the third bead, the crescent-shaped indent that made the necklace unique and identifiable. She took another photo of the appraisal page with her phone, this time zooming in on the chip and the handwritten notation beneath it. She saved the photo to the documentation folder, then returned the appraisal folder to the filing cabinet. That evening, Ellen made herself a simple dinner, scrambled eggs with toast and a side of sliced tomatoes, and ate at the kitchen table while reading a library book about the industrial history of the Great Lakes. She was tired, but her mind felt clear and focused, processing information in the methodical way she had developed over decades of administrative work. She kept thinking about the wristwatch, the way Greg had presented it as a casual gift from a satisfied client, but also the way the explanation had felt slightly too polished, as if he had practiced the story in advance. She thought about the tote bags in the kitchen, identical to the ones she imagined in the elevator security footage that Luis might have seen. She thought about Mara's glance down the hallway during her Sunday visit, the way her eyes had lingered on the bedroom door as if calculating something. Small things. Ordinary things. But they were adding up to a pattern, and Ellen had spent her career recognizing patterns in data, in behavior, in the small inconsistencies that revealed larger truths. She finished her dinner, washed the dishes, and sat back down at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea. Then she took out her phone and composed a new note. Next steps: 1. Contact Luis and inquire about security footage from the night of Tuesday, September 26th, focusing on elevator activity and side entrance access. 2. Request formal preservation of footage through the building manager. 3. Review all appraisal documents and create comprehensive inventory of jewelry box contents. 4. Consider consulting with an attorney regarding property protection and family access protocols. 5. Document all future interactions with Mara, Greg, and Nicole, including dates, times, locations, and topics discussed. She saved the note and set the phone down. Outside, the sky had darkened, and the streetlights along the river were beginning to glow. Ellen stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the water moving slowly past, reflecting the lights in long, wavering lines. She thought about trust, about how it accumulated slowly over years and could be dismantled in a matter of days. She thought about family, about the assumption that blood relationships carried inherent loyalty and honesty. And she thought about the blue linen box sitting on her kitchen counter, the empty space where the amber necklace should have been, the way absence could speak as loudly as presence if you knew how to listen. By the time she went to bed that night, Ellen had made a series of decisions. She would contact Luis in the morning and ask him, politely and directly, about the security footage. She would be factual, not accusatory. She would frame it as a routine inquiry, a matter of personal record-keeping. And depending on what he told her, she would decide the next step. She wouldn't confront Mara or Greg. Not yet. Not until she had gathered all the facts, organized them properly, and understood exactly what had happened and when. Because Ellen knew, from years of professional experience, that conclusions without evidence were worthless, and that the person who documented carefully and spoke last usually won. The next morning, Ellen called the building manager's office and left a message on Donald Kerr's voicemail. She kept it brief and professional. "Good morning, Donald. This is Ellen Carver from Unit 803. I'd like to speak with you about requesting access to security footage from last week. Please call me back at your convenience. Thank you." She hung up and made herself breakfast, scrambled eggs again, with coffee this time instead of tea. She was starting to feel stronger, more like herself. The incisions were healing well, the soreness fading to a dull ache that was easy to ignore. Donald called her back just before noon. His voice was pleasant but formal, the tone of someone who had spent years managing tenant relations and had learned to be helpful without being overly familiar. "Miss Carver," he said. "How can I help you?" "I have a question about the security footage." There was a pause, just a beat, as if he were mentally shifting gears. "Is there a problem?" "Not a problem exactly. I want to review the clips from a specific night." "Which night?" "Tuesday, September 26th. Late evening, after midnight." "May I ask why?" Ellen had anticipated this question and had prepared an answer that was truthful without being revealing. "I'm checking on some personal items. I want to confirm who had access to the building during that time period." Another pause, slightly longer. "You'll need to submit a formal request. I can email you the form." "That's fine. Please send it. Once I receive the completed form, I'll forward it to our security vendor and to the property management attorney. It's standard procedure for any footage request." "I understand. How long does the process usually take?" "A few days, typically. The vendor pulls the clips and uploads them to a secure folder. I'll send you the access link once they're ready." "Thank you, Donald." "Of course. I'll send the form right away." The form arrived in her email within 15 minutes. Ellen opened it, scanned through the fields, and began filling it out. The form asked for her name, unit number, the date range of the footage requested, the specific camera locations, and a brief explanation of the reason for the request. Ellen typed carefully, requesting footage from Tuesday, September 26, 2025, between the hours of 12 midnight and 2 a.m. Camera locations: main lobby, passenger elevator, side entrance. Reason: verifying access to building during specified time period for personal property verification purposes. She saved the completed form, attached it to a reply email, and sent it back to Donald. Then she took out her phone and called Luis. She didn't have his personal number, but she had the building's maintenance line, which forwarded to his cell phone during his shift hours. He answered on the third ring, his voice slightly wary, the way people sound when they receive unexpected calls at work. "This is Luis." "Luis, this is Ellen Carver from Unit 803. "Miss Carver. How are you?" "I'm well, thank you. I wanted to ask you about something." "Of course. What do you need?" "Do you remember the night you fixed the vacuum?" "Tuesday, September 26th. There was a pause, and Ellen could hear background noise on his end, the sound of a vacuum running in the distance. "Yes. I ran late that night. Had to replace the motor. I saw that you logged it in the maintenance binder. Very thorough. Thank you. I try to keep good records. That's actually why I'm calling. I've requested the security footage from that night, and I wanted to ask if you noticed anything unusual during your rounds." Another pause, longer this time. When Luis spoke again, his voice was careful, measured. "What kind of unusual?" "Activity in the building. People coming or going late." There was a long silence. Ellen waited, letting the question sit. Finally, Luis said, "I did see something. I wasn't sure if I should mention it." "Please do." "I unlocked the side entrance for 3 people around 12:30, 12:40. Their key fob wasn't working. I thought they were residents or guests." "Did you recognize them?" "I thought they looked familiar. I'd seen them visiting your floor before." "What did they do?" "They went to the elevator. I went back to my work. Later, when I reviewed the security clips for my shift report, I saw them come back down about 40 minutes later. They were carrying bags." "What kind of bags?" "Canvas totes. Grocery store style. The bags looked heavier when they left than when they came in." Ellen's grip tightened slightly on the phone. Did you save the clips? Yes. I saved them to a folder on my desktop. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I thought someone might want to see them eventually. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what you saw? Luis hesitated. A statement for what? I'm documenting some discrepancies regarding my personal property. I may need to verify who had access to my unit during my recovery. Another long pause. Then Luis said quietly, were they family? Yes. My sister, her husband, and possibly my niece. I see. His voice softened with something that might have been sympathy or regret. I'll provide a statement if you need it. I saw what I saw. The timestamps are accurate. Thank you, Luis. I appreciate it. Miss Carver? I'm sorry if something happened. You have nothing to apologize for. You did your job correctly. That's more than I can say for some people. They hung up, and Ellen sat at the kitchen table for a long moment, staring at her phone. Then she opened the Notes app and added a new entry, spoke with Luis Ramirez, building janitor. Confirmed he unlocked side entrance for 3 people at approximately 12:30 to 12:40 a.m. on Tuesday, September 26th. Confirmed people proceeded to passenger elevator. Confirmed return approximately 40 minutes later with canvas tote bags that appeared fuller/heavier. Luis saved security clips and is willing to provide written statement. Timestamps are accurate and logged in building maintenance records. She saved the note and walked to the window. The river moved slowly past, dark and steady. She thought about the amber necklace, about the way it had sat in that drawer for years without anyone noticing or caring, and about how its disappearance had set in motion a chain of inquiry that was beginning to reveal something larger than a missing piece of jewelry. Trust, once broken, didn't just crack, it shattered into fragments that were impossible to reassemble into their original form. And Ellen, standing in her quiet apartment with her phone in her hand and her grandmother's necklace gone, understood that she was no longer trying to repair trust. She was trying to establish accountability. There was a difference. 3 days later, Ellen received an email from Donald Kerr with a link to the security footage. The email was brief. Miss Carver, per your request, attached is the link to the security clips from 9/26. Footage includes the main lobby, passenger elevator, and side entrance between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m. Clips are retained for 60 days per company policy. Let me know if you need anything else. DK. Ellen clicked the link, which opened a secure folder containing 4 video files. She downloaded them to her laptop and watched them one by one, taking notes as she went. The first clip showed the lobby at 12:39 in the morning. The camera angle was high, mounted on the ceiling near the reception desk, looking down at the mailboxes and the glass doors of the side entrance. The footage was in black and white, slightly grainy, but clear enough to identify shapes and movements. 3 people were standing outside the glass doors, 2 women and a man. One of the women leaned close to the sensor panel beside the door, holding what appeared to be a key fob. She tapped it against the sensor twice. The door didn't open. She tried again with the same result. Then she knocked lightly on the glass, 3 soft taps. A moment later, Luis appeared in the frame, pushing his cleaning cart from the direction of the mailboxes. He walked to the door, looked at the 3 people, and unlocked it from the inside. He held it open as they entered, nodded at something one of them said, and then returned to his cart. The 3 people walked toward the elevators, out of the camera's view. The second clip showed the passenger elevator at 12:43 in the morning. The camera was mounted in the upper corner of the elevator car, pointed down at the door and the interior. The 3 people entered, 2 women and a man, all clearly visible now. Ellen recognized them immediately. Mara, wearing a dark jacket and carrying a folded umbrella. Greg, in jeans and a light windbreaker, carrying 2 dark green canvas tote bags. And Nicole, in a sweater and leggings, carrying 1 tote bag. The bags looked flat, almost empty. The elevator doors closed, and the clip ended. The third clip showed the same elevator at 1:21 in the morning, 38 minutes after the previous clip. The doors opened on the lobby level, and the same 3 people exited. Mara still carried the umbrella, now unfolded and dripping slightly. Greg carried the 2 tote bags, which now sagged visibly at the handles, the canvas stretched by the weight of whatever was inside. Nicole carried her tote bag, which also looked heavier, the bottom rounded with contents. They walked out of the frame toward the side entrance. The fourth clip showed the side entrance at 1:23 in the morning. The three people walked out into the parking lot. The rain was visible now, falling in diagonal lines through the camera's view. They walked to a vehicle parked near the entrance, a dark sedan that Ellen recognized as Mara's Honda Accord. They loaded the tote bags into the trunk, climbed into the car, and drove away. The license plate was visible for several seconds before the car turned out of the frame. Ellen paused the video, zoomed in, and wrote down the plate number in her notes, even though she already knew it was Mara's car. She watched all four clips twice more, pausing at key moments to take screenshots. She noted the timestamps, the positions of the people, the appearance of the bags, the vehicle information. Then she opened a new document on her laptop and created a detailed timeline. Tuesday, September 26, 2025. 12:39 a.m. Three individuals approach the side entrance of the building. Key fob fails to register. Individuals knock on glass. Building janitor Luis Ramirez unlocks the door manually and admits individuals. Individuals identified as Marjorie Ellison, sister, Gregory Ellison, brother-in-law, Nicole Ellison, niece. 12:43 a.m. Same three individuals enter the passenger elevator in the lobby, carrying three canvas tote bags, 2 green, 1 green. Bags appear empty or nearly empty. Elevator ascends. Building access log, verified separately elevator accessed 8th floor at 12:44 a.m. No other floors were accessed during this time period. 1:20 a.m. Same three individuals descend in the passenger elevator, carrying the same three tote bags. Bags now appear full/weighted, handles sagging, canvas stretched. Estimated weight increase, significant, consistent with multiple items. 1:23 a.m. Three individuals exit the building via the side entrance. Load tote bags into trunk of the vehicle, Honda Accord, license plate visible. Vehicle departs building property. Total time elapsed between entry and exit, 44 minutes. Total time elapsed between elevator ascent and descent, 37 minutes. Ellen Carver was asleep on the sofa in Unit 803 during this entire time period. No knowledge of entry or activity. No permission given for access to the unit or removal of property. She saved the document, then opened her phone and updated her notes with a single line. Security footage confirms Mara, Greg, and Nicole entered building at 12:39 a.m. on 9/26, accessed 8th floor, my unit. Remained inside for 37 minutes, exited with visibly full bags. All activity documented with timestamps and video evidence. Ellen sat back in her chair and stared at the screen. The evidence was clear, undeniable, and damning. Her family had entered her apartment in the middle of the night while she slept, taken items without permission, and left. The only question now was what, exactly, they had taken. She knew the amber necklace was gone. What else? She stood, walked to the bedroom, and opened the top drawer of the dresser. She took out the blue linen box, carried it to the kitchen table, and opened it carefully. The pearl studs, the silver cuff, the garnet earrings. She checked each piece against the appraisal folder, comparing the photographs to the actual items. Everything else was still there. Only the amber necklace was missing. But maybe that wasn't everything. Ellen walked back to the bedroom and began a systematic inventory. She checked the closet, the nightstand, the shelves in the bathroom. She looked through her small collection of books, her folders of papers, her filing cabinet. She checked the living room, the kitchen, the coat closet by the front door. As she moved through the apartment, she noted anything that seemed out of place or different from how she remembered leaving it. A key in the bowl by the door, angled differently. A cushion on the sofa, nudged slightly out of its usual position. A lavender sachet in the bathroom drawer, moved to the wrong side. Small things, so small they could easily be explained by her own movement during her recovery, but added together they created a picture of someone else moving through her space, touching her things, making decisions about what to take and what to leave. By evening, Ellen had completed her inventory and concluded that only the amber necklace was missing. But the knowledge that her family had been in her apartment without permission, going through her belongings while she slept, was almost worse than the theft itself. It was a violation of privacy, a betrayal of trust, an assumption that her space and her possessions were theirs to control. And that realization, more than the loss of the necklace, clarified what Ellen needed to do next. She needed a lawyer. Ellen spent the weekend researching attorneys who specialized in estate disputes, property recovery, and family law. She read reviews online, checked credentials with the State Bar Association, and made a list of potential candidates. By Sunday evening, she had narrowed it down to 3 names. She sent inquiry emails to all of them, explaining briefly that she needed consultation regarding unauthorized access to her property and the removal of personal items by family members. She asked about their experience with similar cases, their fee structures, and their availability for an initial consultation. By Monday morning, she had received responses from 2 of the 3. The first attorney was a man in his late 60s who sounded tired on the phone when she called him back. He asked for a retainer of $5,000 before he would even review the case, and he seemed more interested in discussing his upcoming retirement plans than in hearing about her situation. Ellen thanked him politely and ended the call. The second attorney was a woman named Denise Fuller. Her email was concise and professional, 3 short paragraphs outlining her experience with property disputes, her approach to family cases, and her fee structure. She charged $250 per hour for legal work, but she offered a free 30-minute initial consultation to determine if the case was a good fit. She included a link to an online scheduling system and suggested that Ellen bring any relevant documentation to the meeting. Ellen appreciated the clarity and the efficiency. She scheduled an appointment for Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Denise Fuller's office was located on the 3rd floor of a narrow brick building on East Wisconsin Avenue, in a part of downtown that had once been industrial but was now slowly transitioning to mixed-use office space and residential lofts. The building had an old-fashioned elevator with brass fixtures and a gate that had to be manually closed. Ellen rode it to the 3rd floor, found the office door marked Fuller and Associates, attorneys at law, and knocked. A voice called, "Come in," and Ellen entered. The waiting room was small and unadorned. 2 chairs upholstered in dark blue fabric, a side table stacked with legal magazines and community newspapers, and a window that overlooked the street. Denise met Ellen at the inner door and led her back to a modest office with a wooden desk, 2 chairs, and a bookshelf lined with legal texts, 3 ring binders, and file boxes. Denise was tall, probably just over 6 feet, with short gray hair cut in a practical style and sharp blue eyes behind rimless glasses. She wore a navy cardigan over a white blouse, dark slacks, and flat shoes. She shook Ellen's hand firmly and gestured to one of the chairs. "Miss Carver," she said, sitting down behind the desk. "Thank you for coming in. Tell me what's going on." Ellen had prepared for this moment. She had brought a folder containing printed copies of the appraisal pages, screenshots of the security footage with timestamps annotated, the timeline she had written, her handwritten notes from the past 2 weeks, and the text message exchange with Nicole about the pearl studs. She set the folder on the desk and began to explain, speaking in the same clear, factual tone she had used in countless work presentations over the years. She told Denise about the surgery and the recovery period. She described the family visits, the offers of help, the sense that something was slightly off. She explained about the blue linen jewelry box and the missing amber necklace, the one with the distinctive chip on the 3rd bead. She showed Denise the appraisal documents with the photographs and the handwritten notes. She walked Denise through the security footage, pointing out the timestamps, the failed key fob, the manual unlock by Luis, the tote bags that went in flat and came out full. She explained about the key her sister and brother-in-law had been given 7 years earlier, the one that had never been returned. And she described the Sunday lunch, the wristwatch Greg had been wearing, the tote bags she had seen on the kitchen counter, the way the pieces were starting to fit together into a pattern she couldn't ignore. Denise listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When Ellen finished, Denise leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen thoughtfully against the desk. "All right," she said. "Let's talk about what you have and what you need." "Okay. You have clear proof of ownership. The appraisal documents are excellent, especially the photographs and the detailed notes about the chip on the third bead. That makes the necklace uniquely identifiable, which is important. You have proof of access. Your sister and brother-in-law have a key, and they're visible on the security footage entering and exiting the building during a time when you were asleep and had no knowledge of their presence. The timestamps are precise, the footage is clear, and you have a witness in the janitor who can verify both the manual unlock and his observations. That's all very strong." Ellen nodded. "What we don't have yet," Denise continued, "is direct proof that they took the necklace. We have suspicious circumstances, a pattern of behavior, and opportunity. But unless they admit to taking it, or unless we can find it in their possession or trace it to a pawn transaction, we're building an inferential case. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes. We can prove they were there, but not exactly what they did." "Correct. Now, that doesn't mean we can't proceed. Circumstantial cases can be very strong, especially when the circumstances are this clear. But it does mean we need to think carefully about strategy. What would you recommend?" Denise set her pen down and looked at Ellen directly. "We start by documenting everything you've already gathered, and we add to it. I'll need an affidavit from you stating the facts as you know them. I'll need written statements from the janitor and the building manager. I'll need copies of the building's access logs and maintenance records. And I'll need authorization to send formal preservation notices to local pawn shops in case your family tried to sell the necklace." "I can do all of that." "Good. Once we have a complete file, we draft what's called a demand for return of converted property. It's a formal letter that lays out the facts, cites the evidence, and requests the return of the missing items within a specific time frame. We send it certified mail to your sister and brother-in-law at their home address, and we copy it to any business addresses we can verify. If your brother-in-law has a contractor's license, for example, we send it to the address on file with the state. What if they deny taking anything? Then we ask them to account for their presence in your apartment at that time. We ask them to explain the footage, the bags, the timing. Most people don't have good answers for those questions. And if they continue to deny involvement, we proceed with a civil complaint for conversion and theft, and we let a judge sort it out." Ellen considered this. "How long does the process usually take?" "It depends on their response. If they cooperate and return the items voluntarily, we can settle in a few weeks. If they fight it, we could be looking at several months of litigation. But in my experience, most family disputes settle once people realize there's a documented paper trail and potential legal consequences." "What about the police? Should I file a report?" "You should, even if the police don't pursue it as a criminal matter. Having a police report on file strengthens our civil case because it shows you took the matter seriously from the beginning and reported it to the appropriate authorities." Ellen nodded slowly, processing the information. "What are your fees?" $250 per hour for my time. I'll need a retainer of $2,000 to start. If the case settles quickly, you'll get a refund of any unused portion. If it goes to litigation, we'll reassess as we go. I can also petition the court to order your sister and brother-in-law to pay your legal fees if we prevail, but that's not guaranteed." "That seems reasonable." Denise smiled, a brief softening of her otherwise serious expression. "You're more organized than 90% of the clients who walk through that door. That's going to save us a lot of time and, frankly, a lot of money. You've done the legwork already. Now we just need to formalize it and apply pressure in the right places." Ellen left Denise's office with a list of tasks, a timeline, and a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. She filed a police report online that evening, describing the missing necklace and the suspicious late-night entry without yet naming her sister or brother-in-law by name. She checked the box indicating known persons may be involved and provided the case number to Denise via email. The report was assigned a case number and routed to the non-emergency property crimes unit, where it would be reviewed by a detective within 5 to 7 business days. Ellen printed the confirmation email and added it to her growing folder of documentation. Over the next week, Ellen worked methodically through Denise's task list. She drafted a detailed affidavit, recounting the timeline of events from her hospital discharge through the discovery of the missing necklace and the review of the security footage. She described her relationship with Mara and Greg, the history of the key they had been given, and her complete lack of knowledge or consent regarding their entry into her apartment on the night of September 26th. She signed the affidavit, had it notarized at a bank branch near her condo, and sent the original to Denise's office via certified mail. She contacted Luis again and asked him to provide a written statement about what he had observed. Luis agreed and sent her a typed statement on building letterhead within 2 days. The statement was brief but precise. On Tuesday, September 26, 2025, at approximately 12:39 a.m., I manually unlocked the side entrance of the building to admit 3 individuals whose key fob failed to register with the access system. I recognized the individuals as frequent visitors to the 8th floor. They proceeded to the passenger elevator carrying canvas tote bags. At approximately 1:20 a.m., I observed the same 3 individuals exiting the passenger elevator with the same tote bags, which now appeared full or weighted. I saved the security footage clips to a separate folder and noted the timestamps in my personal maintenance log. I am willing to provide testimony if required. Luis Ramirez, night maintenance staff. Ellen forwarded the statement to Denise and thanked Luis with a handwritten note and a $50 gift card to a local restaurant, a small gesture of appreciation for his professionalism and willingness to get involved. She also contacted Donald Kerr and requested formal preservation of the security footage beyond the standard 30-day retention period. Donald sent her a form, which she filled out and returned, and he confirmed that the footage would be preserved for 90 days and that copies would be provided to any legal counsel upon written request. Ellen sent Denise the confirmation email and the building's contact information. Finally, Ellen created a comprehensive spreadsheet on her laptop, organizing all of the missing necklaces' information in one place. She included columns for item description, last confirmed date of possession, appraised value, photographic reference, distinguishing features, and sentimental significance. For the amber necklace, she wrote, circa 1890, brass wire, hand-polished irregular amber beads ranging from pale honey to deep russet. Chip-on bead number 3 from clasp, crescent-shaped indent on left side. Appraised value $450. Family provenance, maternal grandmother, circa 1920, mother, circa 1975, L&M, Carver, circa 2005. Irreplaceable sentimental value. Last confirmed in possession, August 27, 2025, during pre-surgery organization of bedroom dresser. She sent the spreadsheet to Denise, who reviewed it and called her that evening. "This is excellent," Denise said. "Very thorough. I'm going to start drafting the demand letter. It'll take me a few days to put it together properly, but once it's ready, I'll send you a copy for review before we send it out." "Thank you. One more thing. Have you had any contact with your sister or brother-in-law since you discovered the necklace was missing?" "No direct contact. Mara sent me a text last week asking how I was feeling, but I kept my response brief. Just said I was recovering and would be in touch soon." "Good. Keep it that way. Don't confront them, don't accuse them, don't give them any indication that you know about the security footage. We want the demand letter to be the first time they realize we have documentation. The element of surprise is useful." "Understood. In the meantime, I'd suggest you do one more thing." "What's that?" "Invite them to dinner. Act normal. See how they behave when they think nothing's wrong. Their reactions, their conversation, their body language, it all becomes part of the record. And if they're comfortable and unsuspecting, they might say or do something that strengthens our case." Ellen paused, considering the suggestion. It felt manipulative, calculating, almost cold. But it was also smart. "All right," she said. "I'll invite them for this weekend." "Good. Keep notes afterward. Time, date, topics discussed, anything unusual. And Ellen? Don't let them see you watching them. Just be yourself." Ellen sent Mara a text that evening, feeling much better. Would love to have you and Greg over for dinner Saturday. 6 p.m.? Nothing fancy. Just want to say thanks for all your help, Mara replied within minutes. That sounds lovely. We'll be there. Can we bring anything? Ellen responded, just yourselves. See you Saturday. Saturday evening arrived cool and clear, with a hint of autumn finally settling into the air. Ellen spent the afternoon preparing dinner, roasting a chicken with potatoes and carrots, the kind of simple, satisfying meal that Mara had always liked. She set the table with her everyday dishes, poured water into glasses, and tried to push down the knot of tension in her stomach. She was about to sit across from her sister and brother-in-law, knowing what they had done, and pretend everything was fine. It felt wrong, dishonest, contrary to her nature. But it was also necessary. She was gathering information, documenting behavior, building a case. This was just another form of evidence. Mara and Greg arrived promptly at 6, carrying a bottle of wine and a bakery box with a pie inside. They looked relaxed, cheerful, entirely at ease. Mara hugged Ellen and commented on how much better she looked. Greg shook her hand and asked about her recovery timeline. They settled into the living room while Ellen finished the final preparations, and within minutes the conversation turned to mundane topics. The weather, a news story about road construction on the interstate, a mutual acquaintance who had recently retired. Everything felt normal, pleasant, unremarkable. Dinner proceeded smoothly. They ate, talked, laughed at a story Greg told about a difficult client who kept changing their mind about cabinet hardware. Mara asked about Ellen's plans for the holidays, whether she would host Thanksgiving or prefer to go to Mara's house. Ellen said she hadn't decided yet, deflecting with a vague comment about waiting to see how her energy levels improved. Throughout the meal, Ellen watched them carefully, noting their ease, their lack of concern, their complete absence of guilt or discomfort. If they felt any anxiety about what they had done, they hid it perfectly. After dinner, they moved back to the living room for coffee and pie. At one point, Mara excused herself to use the bathroom, and Ellen noticed that she took slightly longer than necessary, perhaps 2 or 3 minutes more than a simple bathroom trip would require. When she returned, her expression was unchanged, but Ellen wondered if she had walked down the hallway, glanced into the bedroom, checked to see if anything looked different. It was impossible to know for certain, but Ellen noted it mentally. By 8:30, Mara and Greg were preparing to leave. They thanked Ellen for dinner, said they should do it again soon, and reminded her to call if she needed anything. Ellen walked them to the door, waved as they stepped into the hallway, and closed the door behind them. Then she stood in the quiet apartment, listening to the sound of the elevator descending, and felt a wave of exhaustion mixed with relief. She had done it. She had maintained the facade, gathered her observations, and given them no indication that anything was wrong. She walked to the kitchen table, took out her phone, and opened the Notes app. She typed, Saturday dinner with Mara and Greg. 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. behavior. Relaxed, comfortable, no signs of guilt or anxiety. Conversation. Normal family topics, no mention of jewelry or personal property. Mara took extended bathroom trip, approximately 4 to 5 minutes, possibly walked past bedroom. No confrontation. No suspicion evident. Dinner concluded normally. She saved the note, then added one more line. By autumn, I had everything I needed. The following Monday, Denise called Ellen to say the demand letter was ready. I'm sending you a draft to review. Read it carefully and let me know if anything needs to be corrected or clarified. Once you approve it, we'll send it out certified mail. The draft arrived in Ellen's email within the hour. She opened the attachment and began to read. Demand for return of converted property. To Marjorie Ellison and Gregory Ellison. From Denise Fuller, attorney at law, on behalf of Ellen M. Carver. Date, November 3, 2025. Re. Unauthorized entry and removal of personal property from Residential Unit 803, North Water Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Dear Mrs. and Mr. Ellison, this office represents Ellen M. Carver regarding the unauthorized entry into her residence and the subsequent removal of personal property without her knowledge or consent. This letter constitutes a formal demand for the immediate return of all converted property and notification of our client's intent to pursue all available legal remedies if compliance is not achieved within the timeframe specified below. Factual background. On Tuesday, September 26, 2025, at approximately 12:39 a.m., you, along with a third individual identified as Nicole Ellison, entered the residential building located at North Water Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Building security footage, access logs, and witness statements confirm the following. Your key fob failed to register with the building's access system at the side entrance. The building's night maintenance staff manually unlocked the door to admit you. You proceeded to the passenger elevator carrying 3 canvas tote bags. You accessed the 8th floor, where Miss Carver's residential unit is located. You remained on the 8th floor for approximately 37 minutes. You exited the building at approximately 1:20 a.m. carrying the same 3 tote bags, which now appeared visibly full and weighted. You loaded the tote bags into a vehicle and departed the premises. At the time of your entry, Miss Carver was recovering from recent surgery and was asleep in her residence. She had no knowledge of your presence and did not grant permission for you to enter her unit or remove any property. Missing property. Following your unauthorized entry, Miss Carver discovered that the following item was missing from her residence. 1 amber bead necklace, circa 1890, strung on brass wire, containing hand-polished irregular amber beads. The necklace is uniquely identifiable by a chip on the 3rd bead from the clasp, crescent-shaped, located on the left side of the bead. The necklace was appraised in January 2018 at a value of $450. The necklace has significant sentimental value as it belonged to Miss Carver's grandmother and mother before being passed to her. Photographic evidence of the necklace, including close-up documentation of the identifying chip, is attached as Exhibit A. Appraisal documentation is attached as Exhibit B. Legal basis. Your unauthorized entry into Miss Carver's residence and the removal of her property without consent constitutes conversion under Wisconsin law. Conversion is defined as the unauthorized exercise of control over another's property in a manner inconsistent with the owner's rights. Your actions also constitute trespass and potentially theft, depending on intent. Demand. We hereby demand the following. Immediate return of the amber bead necklace described above, in the condition in which it was taken, to this office no later than Friday, November 10, 2025, at 4 p.m. Written inventory of any other items removed from Miss Carver's residence during your entry on September 26, 2025. Written acknowledgement that you will not enter Miss Carver's residence in the future without her express written consent. Should you fail to comply with this demand, Miss Carver will pursue all available legal remedies, including but not limited to filing a civil complaint for conversion, trespass, and theft, seeking compensatory damages, including the appraised value of the necklace plus emotional distress damages, seeking punitive damages, seeking reimbursement of all legal fees and costs, reporting the matter to your homeowner's insurance carrier, filing a police report identifying you by name. We have already taken steps to preserve evidence, including security footage, access logs, witness statements, and appraisal documentation. We have also notified local pawn shops to watch for the necklace in case you attempt to sell it. This matter can be resolved privately and efficiently if you choose to comply with this demand. However, if you force Miss Carver to pursue litigation, she is prepared to do so. Please direct all communications to this office. Do not contact Miss Carver directly. Sincerely, Denise Fuller, Attorney at Law. Ellen read the letter 3 times, checking every detail against her own records. It was thorough, factual, and appropriately firm without being inflammatory. She called Denise and approved it. Send it, she said. I'll send certified copies to their home address and to Mr. Ellison's business address on file with the State Contractors Licensing Board. I'll also send courtesy copies to their mortgage lender, since the address of record matches the property securing their home equity line of credit. That often gets people's attention. Why the lender? Because if there's a potential judgment against them for theft or conversion, it affects their creditworthiness and potentially the value of the collateral securing their debt. Lenders don't like surprises. It's not an accusation, it's a preservation of interest. We're notifying relevant parties that there's a potential claim. That seems aggressive. It's strategic. We're applying pressure through institutional channels, not through emotion. It's very effective. The letters went out on Tuesday, November 7th. Ellen received confirmation of delivery on Thursday, November 9th. Mara's signature appeared on the certified mail receipt for the home delivery. Greg's assistant signed for the business delivery. The mortgage lender's receipt was signed by someone in their legal department. Ellen's phone began ringing at 2:47 p.m. on Thursday. Mara called 6 times in a row. Ellen didn't answer. At 3:15, Greg called twice. Ellen didn't answer. At 4 o'clock, Nicole sent a text, "Aunt Ellen, please call me. My parents are really upset and I don't understand what's happening." Ellen replied with a single sentence, "Please direct all communication to Denise Fuller, attorney at law." Mara texted at 4:30, "Ellen, what is this? We were just trying to help you." Ellen didn't respond. Denise had been clear, no direct communication. Mara texted again at 5, "You're making this into something it's not. We're family." Still no response. At 6, Mara texted, "We didn't take anything. We were organizing things for you because you were sick." Ellen screenshot every message and forwarded them to Denise without comment. On Friday morning, Denise called Ellen. "They're rattled. Mara called my office 3 times yesterday afternoon. I didn't take the calls. I sent a follow-up email this morning reiterating the deadline, 4 p.m. today. We'll see if they comply." Do you think they will? Honestly? Probably not with everything. But they'll return something to show good faith. The question is whether they'll return the necklace. At 3:45 on Friday afternoon, a courier arrived at Denise's office with 2 canvas tote bags. Denise called Ellen immediately. They delivered. "What's inside?" "Let me check." "Hold on." Ellen heard rustling, the sound of items being moved. Then Denise's voice again, careful and measured. "The pearl studs are here. The silver cuff is here. The garnet earrings are here. There's an empty velvet tray, the kind that holds a necklace. But no necklace." Ellen closed her eyes. She had expected this, but the confirmation still hurt. So they're admitting they took the other items, but claiming they don't have the necklace. That's how I read it. "I'm photographing everything now and preparing a chain of custody form for you to sign when you come in. We'll log each item, note its condition, and add this to the file." "What do we do about the necklace?" "We escalate. I'll file a notice of potential claim with their homeowner's insurance carrier. I'll also send a second letter offering mediation with a neutral third party. If they refuse or if mediation fails, we file a civil complaint. But let's see how they respond first." Ellen went to Denise's office that evening and reviewed the returned items. Everything was there except the amber necklace. She signed the chain of custody form, watched as Denise placed the items in a locked file cabinet, and accepted a receipt documenting what had been returned and what remained missing. As she was preparing to leave, Denise said, "Ellen, I want you to be prepared for the possibility that we never recover the necklace. They may have sold it, lost it, or hidden it somewhere we can't trace. If that happens, we can still pursue damages for its appraised value, but the item itself may be gone." "I know. Are you all right with that?" Ellen thought for a moment, then said quietly, "The necklace mattered because of what it represented. My grandmother, my mother, the continuity of family. But that continuity is already broken. What matters now is accountability. I want them to acknowledge what they did. I want it on the record. And I want to make sure they never have access to my home or my property again." Denise nodded. "Then we'll make sure that happens." The following week, Denise filed a notice of potential claim with Mara and Greg's homeowner's insurance carrier, a large national company that handled policies throughout the Midwest. The notice outlined the facts of the case, cited the returned items as evidence of entry and removal, and noted that the missing amber necklace remained unaccounted for. Within 3 days, An adjuster from the insurance company called Denise and asked for copies of the security footage, the police report, and the appraisal documentation. Denise provided everything. The adjuster said the claim would be investigated and that a decision about coverage would be made within 30 days. Denise also sent a second letter to Mara and Greg, this time proposing mediation with a retired judge in a neighboring town. Mediation is private, efficient, and often leads to resolution without the time and expense of litigation, the letter stated. If you are willing to participate in good faith mediation, please respond within 7 business days. If you do not respond, or if you decline mediation, Ms. Carver will proceed with filing a civil complaint in Milwaukee County Circuit Court. Greg's attorney, a lawyer named Peter Holst who specialized in small business disputes and family matters, responded within 48 hours. My clients are willing to participate in mediation, he wrote. Please propose available dates and a mutually acceptable mediator. Denise proposed Judge Margaret Lindstrom, a retired circuit court judge with 30 years of experience mediating family and property disputes. Both sides agreed. The mediation was scheduled for Tuesday, November 28th at 10 a.m. in a small office suite in Brookfield. Ellen prepared for the mediation carefully. She reviewed all of the documentation, rehearsed her timeline, and discussed strategy with Denise. Stay calm, Denise advised. Answer questions directly and factually. Don't get emotional, don't argue, don't accuse. Just state what happened. The judge will do the rest. On the morning of the mediation, Ellen dressed in simple, professional clothes, a dark skirt and blouse, and drove to Brookfield with Denise. The mediation office was located in a converted house on a quiet residential street, the kind of place that felt intentionally neutral and calming. Judge Lindstrom met them in the waiting room, a woman in her early 70s with white hair pulled back in a bun and sharp, intelligent eyes behind reading glasses. She shook hands with Ellen and Denise, showed them to a small conference room with a table and 6 chairs, and explained the process. I'll meet with each party separately first, then we'll come together if appropriate. My role is to facilitate, not to judge, though I'll give you my honest assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of your positions. Mediation is confidential. Nothing said here can be used in court if we don't reach an agreement. Understood. Both Ellen and Denise nodded. Judge Lindstrom met with Ellen and Denise for about 20 minutes, reviewing the facts and asking clarifying questions. Then she met with Mara, Greg, and their attorney in a separate room. 40 minutes later, she brought everyone together in the conference room. Mara and Greg sat on one side of the table with their attorney. Ellen and Denise sat on the other side. Judge Lindstrom sat at the head of the table, a legal pad and pen in front of her. She began without a preamble. Let's start with the facts we all agree on. On Tuesday, September 26, 2025, Mrs. and Mr. Ellison and their daughter Nicole entered Miss Carver's apartment building at approximately 12:39 a.m. Security footage shows them entering, accessing the 8th floor, and leaving approximately 40 minutes later with bags that appeared fuller than when they arrived. Is that accurate? Mara glanced at her attorney, who nodded. Yes, she said quietly. Miss Carver was asleep at the time and did not give you permission to enter her apartment. Is that also accurate? Another pause. Yes. Did you remove any items from her apartment? Mara looked at Greg, then back at Judge Lindstrom. We brought some things home to sort them. We thought she might need help organizing after her surgery. Did she ask you to do that? No, but she wasn't well. We were trying to help. I see. And did you return those items? Yes. We returned everything last week. Judge Lindstrom looked at Ellen. Miss Carver, is that accurate? Ellen kept her voice steady. They returned the pearl studs, the silver cuff, and the garnet earrings. They did not return the amber necklace. Judge Lindstrom turned back to Mara. Mrs. Ellison, do you have the amber necklace? Mara hesitated. I don't think we took it. That's not what I asked. Do you have it now? No. Do you know where it is? No. Did you take it from Miss Carver's apartment? Mara looked down at the table. Her attorney leaned over and whispered something in her ear. She nodded, then said quietly, we may have taken it by mistake. But we don't have it now. Where is it? I don't know. Judge Lindstrom leaned back in her chair and removed her glasses, cleaning them slowly with a cloth from her pocket. Let me be very clear about something. I'm not here to determine criminal liability or assign blame. I'm here to help you reach an agreement that resolves this matter privately. But I can't help you if you're not honest with me. If you took the necklace, say so. If you sold it, say so. If you lost it, say so. But don't tell me you don't know. That's not helpful to anyone. Mara's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them away quickly and said, "We took it. I don't know where it is now." Judge Lindstrom put her glasses back on and picked up her pen. All right. Now we can work with that. Here's what I'm going to propose, and both sides can tell me if it's acceptable. Miss Carver will receive reimbursement for her legal fees and appraisal costs to date. Mr. and Mrs. Ellison will provide a written acknowledgement that they entered Miss Carver's residence without permission and removed property without consent. They will further acknowledge that any future entry will require a written invitation from Miss Carver. Regarding the amber necklace, they will have 60 days to locate and return it. If it is not returned within 60 days, they will pay Miss Carver the appraised value of $450 plus her additional legal costs incurred in pursuing this matter. All parties will sign a stipulated agreement that will be filed with the court to make it enforceable. Does that sound reasonable? Denise looked at Ellen, who nodded. Peter Holst, the attorney for Mara and Greg, said, "We'd like to discuss it privately." Judge Lindstrom gestured to the door. "Take 15 minutes. Mara, Greg, and their attorneys stepped out into the hallway. Ellen and Denise remained in the conference room. Denise poured 2 glasses of water from the pitcher on the table and handed one to Ellen. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. You're doing very well. Clear, calm, factual. That's exactly what we need." 15 minutes later, Mara and Greg returned. Peter Holst said, "We'll accept the terms with one modification. If the necklace is not located within 60 days, my clients will pay the appraised value, but they request that the payment be structured as a settlement rather than as a judgment for conversion. That keeps it out of the public record." Denise looked at Judge Lindstrom, who looked at Ellen. Ellen said, "As long as there's a written acknowledgement of what happened and it's enforceable, I'm fine with that." Judge Lindstrom nodded and began drafting the agreement on her laptop. Within an hour, she had printed 3 copies. Everyone read through the document, signed where indicated, and received a copy. Judge Lindstrom said she would file the original with the Milwaukee County Circuit Court clerk as a stipulated order, which would make it legally binding and enforceable. As they were preparing to leave, Mara approached Ellen in the hallway outside the conference room. "Ellen, can we talk?" Ellen stopped and turned. "About what?" "I'm sorry. We made a mistake." "Yes, you did. I was trying to help. I thought you might need money for medical bills, and the jewelry was just sitting there, and—" Ellen cut her off. "You didn't ask. You came into my home while I was asleep and took things that didn't belong to you. That's not helping. That's theft." "I know. I'm sorry. Are we going to be okay, Mara?" Mara looked down at the floor, tears in her eyes again. "I don't know. I hope so." Ellen turned and walked out with Denise. They didn't speak again until they reached Denise's car. "You handled that well," Denise said as they drove back toward Milwaukee. "It didn't feel like handling anything. It just felt necessary. That's what resolution is. Not satisfied. Just necessity." Ellen stared out the window at the suburban streets sliding past, the neat houses and bare trees, and the first thin layer of snow beginning to accumulate on the lawns. "What happens now?" "Now we wait 60 days. If they return the necklace, the matter is closed. If they don't, they pay you the appraised value plus your legal costs, and we file the settlement as a final order. Either way, you're protected and they understand there are consequences. And if they violate the access restriction, then we file for a restraining order and contempt of court. But I doubt they will. They know you have documentation now, and they know you're willing to enforce your rights." Ellen nodded and continued staring out the window. By the time Denise dropped her off at her condo, evening was beginning to settle in, the light fading from the sky and the street lamps along the river starting to glow. Ellen rode the elevator to the 8th floor, unlocked her door with the new key from the locks she had changed the previous week, and stepped inside. The apartment was quiet, familiar, and safe. She walked to the kitchen, made herself a pot of lentil soup from a recipe she had been perfecting for years, and ate slowly at the table while reading a book about the migratory patterns of monarch butterflies. After dinner, she washed the dishes, dried them, and put them away. Then she walked to the bedroom, stood in front of the dresser, and opened the top drawer. The blue linen box was there, sitting on top of the folded sweater where it had always been. She carried it to the kitchen table, opened it, and looked at the contents. The pearl studs returned. The silver cuff returned. The garnet earrings returned. The empty velvet tray where the amber necklace had lived. She touched the tray lightly with her fingertip, feeling the soft fabric, the small depression where the beads had rested for so many years. Then she closed the box and returned it to the dresser. She walked to the window and looked out at the river. The water moved steadily, dark and constant, reflecting the city lights in long, wavering lines. She thought about the past 2 months, the surgery, the theft, the investigation, the mediation. She thought about trust and how it could be broken so easily, and about accountability and how hard it was to achieve. She thought about her sister and about whether their relationship could ever return to what it had been before, or whether that version of their relationship had been an illusion all along, sustained by assumptions that had never been tested. She didn't have answers to those questions. Maybe she never would. But she had clarity about one thing: what was hers stayed hers, and what was taken would be documented, pursued, and recovered or compensated. And if recovery wasn't possible, there would still be a record, a witness, a consequence. That was enough. It had to be. Ellen made herself a cup of tea and carried it back to the window. She stood there for a long time, sipping slowly, watching the river and the lights and the occasional car passing on the street below. The building was quiet around her, the familiar hum of the elevator, the soft creaks of the floors settling, the distant sound of someone's television through the walls. It was the sound of ordinary life continuing, and Ellen found comfort in that ordinariness. She wasn't angry. She wasn't sad. She was simply clear. And clarity, she had learned, was a form of peace. Winter came early that year, arriving in mid-December with a cold snap that dropped temperatures into the teens and turned the Milwaukee River into a steaming ribbon of water meeting frozen air. Ellen resumed her morning walks, bundled in a long coat and wool scarf, her breath visible in the cold. She liked the sharpness of the season, the way it stripped everything down to essentials, bare trees and gray sky, and the honest cold that couldn't be softened or hidden. 60 days passed. The amber necklace was not returned. On January 27, 2026, Ellen received a certified check from Peter Holst's office in the amount of $975, representing the appraised value of the necklace plus Ellen's documented legal costs. A brief letter accompanied the check, per the stipulated agreement dated November 28, 2025, please find enclosed payment in full for the missing amber necklace. This concludes the matter. Peter Holst, attorney at law. Ellen deposited the check, filed the letter, and sent a copy to Denise. Denise confirmed that the settlement was complete and that the final order had been filed with the court. "It's over," Denise said. "You did it. Thank you for everything. It was my pleasure. You were the most organized client I've ever had. If you ever need anything in the future, don't hesitate to call." Ellen thanked her again and hung up. Then she walked to the bedroom, took the blue linen box from the dresser, and carried it to the kitchen table. She opened it and looked at the contents one last time. The pearl studs, the silver cuff, the garnet earrings, the empty velvet tray. She picked up the tray, held it for a moment, then set it back in the box. She wasn't going to fill that space with something else. The absence was honest. It told the truth. And sometimes, Ellen thought, an empty space was more accurate than any replacement could be. She closed the box and carried it back to the bedroom. But instead of returning it to the drawer, she placed it on top of the dresser where it was visible. She wanted to see it every day, to be reminded not of what was lost, but of what she had learned, that trust required verification, that family didn't exempt people from accountability, and that quiet persistence could achieve what anger never could. Spring arrived slowly, reluctantly, the way it always did in Milwaukee. The snow melted, the river thawed, and the trees along the riverwalk began to bud with that first pale green that marked the beginning of renewal. Ellen continued her routines: morning walks, volunteer work at the literacy program, book club meetings at the library, evenings spent reading or working on the memoir she had started. A dry account of administrative systems and procedures that would probably never be published, but gave her a sense of purpose. She received holiday cards from Mara at Easter and on Mother's Day, brief impersonal notes with just names signed at the bottom. Ellen filed them without responding. They had no other contact. Nicole sent a longer letter in late spring, apologizing for her role in what had happened and asking if they could eventually rebuild their relationship. Ellen filed that letter too, without responding. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. The wound was healing, but some wounds left scars that changed the shape of things permanently. One morning in early June, Ellen was walking along the Riverwalk when she passed the building where she lived and saw a familiar figure in the lobby. Luis Ramirez, no longer wearing his maintenance uniform, was standing by the mailboxes talking to Donald Kerr. Ellen went inside and approached them. "Luis," she said, "I heard you retired." He turned and smiled. "Miss Carver." "Yes, last month. I'm just picking up my final paperwork." "How are you?" "Good. Very good. Spending time with my grandchildren. Doing some fishing. Enjoying life." "You've earned it." He nodded, then said quietly, "I'm glad things worked out for you. That situation last fall. Thank you for everything you did. You made all the difference." "I just did my job." "Not everyone does their job that carefully." "I'm grateful." They shook hands, and Luis left with his folder of paperwork. Ellen rode the elevator to her floor, unlocked her door, and stepped inside. The apartment was warm, filled with morning light. She walked to the bedroom, looked at the blue linen box sitting on the dresser, and thought about how strange it was that a broken vacuum and a late-night maintenance log had become the foundation of justice. How strange and how necessary. That evening, Ellen sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and her laptop. She opened the document she had been working on, the one about administration and procedure, and typed a new section. On evidence and accountability, a case study in how documentation creates consequences. In September of 2025, while recovering from surgery, I discovered that members of my family had entered my home without permission and removed personal property. The only reason I was able to establish what had happened, who was responsible, and when it occurred was because a building janitor ran late on his maintenance rounds, and his delay was documented in multiple overlapping records: a maintenance log, a security system timestamp, an access log, and a personal notebook. These mundane, bureaucratic records became the foundation for recovering my property and establishing accountability. The lesson is this: systems matter. Documentation matters. Procedure matters. Not because they're interesting or dramatic, but because they create a framework of verifiable facts that can withstand scrutiny and serve as the basis for action. In the absence of documentation, we have only competing narratives, and competing narratives rarely lead to resolution. But when facts are preserved, timestamped, cross-referenced, and witnessed, truth emerges. I write this not to tell a personal story, though it is personal, but to illustrate a principle that applies far beyond my individual experience. Justice requires evidence, and evidence requires systems. If you want to protect yourself, your property, your rights, or your truth, document carefully. Keep records. Preserve evidence. Follow procedures. And when something goes wrong, as it inevitably will, those records will be your foundation for response. Some absences are honest. Some spaces tell the truth. And some victories are quiet, achieved through forms and timestamps and the careful work of people who do their jobs correctly when no one is watching. Ellen saved the document, closed her laptop, and stood. She walked to the window and looked out at the river, which flowed steadily in the gathering darkness, reflecting the lights of the city. She had lived in this apartment for 14 years now, and she would probably live here for many more. It was home. And home, she had learned, was not defined by the people who had access to it, but by the person who held the keys and set the boundaries and decided who was welcome. She finished her tea, rinsed the cup, and walked to the bedroom. The blue linen box sat on the dresser, visible and unchanging. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She knew what was inside, and she knew what wasn't. And that knowledge, clear and complete and documented, was enough. Ellen climbed into bed, pulled the covers up, and closed her eyes. Outside, the river kept moving, patient and constant, carrying the day downstream and making room for tomorrow. And inside, Ellen slept soundly. The weight of unfinished questions finally lifted, the boundaries finally clear, the keys finally in the right hands. Things that were hers had returned, except for one. And that one absence, that empty velvet tray, told its own truth. Some things, once taken, can't be replaced. But they can be acknowledged, compensated, and recorded. And sometimes, that's the only justice available. She had done what needed to be done. The record was clear. The boundaries were set. The people who had violated her trust now understood there were consequences. And Ellen Margaret Carver, 56 years old, semi-retired, unmarried, methodical, and unbowed, slept peacefully in her condo above the Milwaukee River, with her own keys and her own terms, exactly where she belonged. The blue linen box stayed on top of the dresser, visible now, not hidden, and the empty space inside it remained empty, a truthful absence that required no explanation and no apology. Some nights, when the building was quiet and the elevator hummed in its shaft, Ellen would set a cup of tea on the dresser and look at the river like it was a long, slow clock, marking time in the only way that mattered, forward, clear, and entirely on her own terms. Every story here will stir your soul. Welcome to Spice and Sugar, your daily escape into real emotions, bold lives, and unforgettable lessons. Here, it's all about love, loss, laughter, and the quiet strength that carries us through. I share stories that make you feel, that remind you you're not alone, that every bitter moment can lead to something sweet. If you want to laugh, cry, and see life through stories that heal and inspire, subscribe and stay a while.